I'm going to create a new project by going to the File menu, choosing New Project. I'm going to make it a Visual C# project, Windows Form Application Type, and I'll just call this Form Demo. When I create a new project, it's going to develop a bunch of source files for me. Those are going to be listed over here in the Solution Explorer, at least some of them. But what I want to focus on here is it develops or creates a form object in the working area of the IDE. You can think of a form as another name for a window. And this form will be our base class for our project. I'm going to click on the form, and over in the Properties window, actually I'm going to pull the Properties window off and have it be a floating palette over here so we can see these together a little more closely. There are several properties that affect how this form looks. One of those is the text property, and by default our form is named Form1. That is the name property, which is up here at the top, and we don't want to change that name property, at least not now. But the text property reflects by default the name. If I were to create a second window, and yes, we can have multiple forms, that would be Form 2. The text property controls what is displayed on the title bar of our form. So I'm just going to call this Form Demo. Press the Enter key, and you'll notice that that title changed in the visual aspect of our form. Another property is the size property. It is listed in pixels with the width, comma, the height. By default, my first form is 300 by 300 pixels. I could make that 400 pixels wide by simply changing the value and pressing the Enter key. I can also grab the form on one of its handles, and I usually grab this bottom right-hand corner handle, and that way I can change the width and the height at the same time. Once I let go of the form with my mouse, it's going to reflect the size. So I can change it by the properties. I can change it visually by dragging. We can also expand this size property and see that it's made up of a width and height, and we can change it there as well. So I'm going to go back to 400 for the width and 300 for the height. Another property that you may want to change is the back color. I'm going to scroll up to the back color property. By the way, the properties can be grouped together by categories. So we have some categories in terms of accessibility, appearance, behavior, data, design, focus, and so forth. I prefer to view the properties alphabetically. It's easier for me to find a property by its alphabetical name rather than trying to figure out which category it might be under. So I'm going to scroll up here again to the back color property. By default, it has a color called Control. This is a Windows-defined property, and that control color could vary from machine to machine based on which theme or color scheme you have set up within Windows. In this property, rather than highlighting through it and changing it, there's a drop-down box. If I click on it, this little icon shows up, or this button shows up. I'm going to click that drop-down arrow, and I get a palette system here with 3 tabs. The system palette shows me those colors that are defined within the Windows environment that are going to vary from machine to machine. You'll see Control is selected there. There's also a Web tab here. These are named colors that browsers understand, and they're kind of grouped together by shades. So you have the reds and the yellows and the greens and the blues and the purples and so forth. I can select one of these and it'll change that color. The third tab is a custom tab, and there's some default system colors here, or default colors. And I could choose a light blue, or I could enter a value here in terms of RGB. So let's do 255, 100, 100. And that gives me access to the 16.7 million different colors that a 24-bit color system can display. So if you're working for a client and you know their RGB values, you can enter them here. By default, our Windows form has a minimize box, a maximize box, and a close box. Those can be turned on or off through the properties as well. For the types of projects we're going to create in here with just one form, we're going to leave those alone. We want to have those controls. Next, we'll look at adding other controls to our form.